Disco Inferno, the dance of the damned on the griddles of hell. What the heck is hell? Various Hebrew and Greek words are translated hell in the King James Bible. Hell itself is an Old English word meaning a cover or covered place. And they used to speak, for instance, of helling potatoes, uh, or it may have come from saying, "What the hell do you want me to do this for?" But at any rate, that's the idea of hell as a covered place. Now, that fits real well. Sheol, the Old Testament analog for hell, it's a nether world shared with and probably derived from Babylonian cosmology. We read about it there too. Hell is pictured as a great walled city with barred gates. It's a place of dust and shadows, and once you go there, you can never hope to return. This is the way Enkidu describes it on his deathbed after a vision of Sheol in the Gilgamesh epic. There, the shades, or the Rephaim, as the Bible calls them, of the dead shuffle around in a confused stupor forever. It says in the Psalms that nobody there praises God, nor does God give a thought to anybody who's there. That's a comforting idea. It's much like the Greek Hades, where people pass a dreary eternity. In the Odyssey, they go to find Achilles' shade there after he's been killed by Paris, I guess it is. And he tells his old friend Odysseus, "I'd rather be a slave up on earth than be king of this dump." And so he wasn't actively tortured. It's just like shuffling around in a bus station forever. Now, Hades, which also appears in the Bible in the New Testament, that is obviously borrowed from Greek religion, as I've just described, but Hades was eventually split into two in Greek mythology as it developed. It was the subterranean place of the dead. Zeus's brother Hades reigned there, and it was named after him. And it possibly took on the aspect of a place of torment because eventually people divided Hades into Tartarus on the one hand, which is a place of richly deserved torments, we're told, and some of them are depicted there. For instance, Ixion, who crossed up the gods. I think he ate some food of theirs he wasn't supposed to eat. He was spread eagled on this iron wheel that turned and turned over the fire forever. And Sisyphus was condemned to roll a boulder up a hill for eternity. And as soon as he got it up there, it would come rolling back down, and he'd have to go and push the darn thing back up again. A great metaphor for a great many jobs today. Tantalus, I guess he's the best known of those damned to Tartaros. He was suspended up to his neck in water, and there was a huge fruit tree right above his head, and the heavily laden boughs were just out of reach. And if he reached up to grab a bite out of one of these apples or pears or whatever, they would pull up just above him, out of his reach. He couldn't get him. If he craned his neck and bent down to lap up a bit of the water in the lake, the water level would go down, but he wouldn't go down with it. So the poor guy always had food and drink apparently within reach, but no luck. Again, just like you and me on a diet. And that's so it became a place of torment. Whereas the good guys would go to a new section opened up called the Elysian Fields, where there would be paradise and so on. But it was still part of Hades under the earth. So Hades didn't necessarily denote a place of torment. Now, in the New Testament, when it's used, it's a little ambiguous because, for instance, Luke 16:23, the story of the rich man and Lazarus, the rich man dies and goes into the fire pit of Hades, and he's tortured there, and he begs for relief, just a glass of water, but no luck. So that's a fiery place. It's not that clear in Matthew 11:26, where Jesus is shown denouncing the places that he has preached that have not repented. And the whole thing is based on Isaiah chapter 14 about the death of the king of Babylon and his going down the chute to Sheol in ignominy with the, and that's how you say it, with the other kings of the past, startled at the rude appearance and the graceless death, no burial, anything, and he says, how'd you get here? I mean, aren't you the guy that said, I will ascend to the mountain and be like the Most High? And so but look at you now. And so Jesus is shown saying, you, Capernaum, will you be exalted to the heavens? No, no. You're going to be brought down to Hades. In other words, the same thing that happened to the king of Babylon is waiting for you. Now, the king of Babylon wasn't said to be tormented there. He's just, again, in the old time, Sheol. So what does this really mean? What should the people of Capernaum expect? Well, I think it's just really a prediction of their fate in the coming war with Rome. Just saying they're going to be destroyed. And they were so high and mighty once, but they won't be pretty soon now. So occasionally the New Testament speaks of Hades. It also in the Gospel speaks of Gehenna, which is a Hebrew word that means really the valley of the sons of Hinnom, in the Old Testament also called Tophet, and so occasionally Tophet, but especially Gehenna became a synonym for hell, and this was definitely a place of fiery torment. It appears that originally this was based on the idea that on the top of Mount Zion, you had the temple, which was like a gateway to heaven. You could encounter God there. And at the foot of the mountain, in the valley of the sons of Hinnom, in Tophet, there was a gateway to hell, basically. The realm of Molech, sometimes spelled Moloch, means the king, but he was the king of this fiery netherworld of torment, or at least destruction, because in this valley people would offer child sacrifices, and that's what gave it such a bad reputation. But the sacrifices were offered to Moloch, who consumed them. Now, were they tortured thereafter, or was it just that he was like a fire demon? I don't know that you could push it beyond that, but at any rate, there's some kind of association with a post-mortem condemnation to the flames, and associated with Gehenna, and Jesus threatens people with that. He says it's better to cut off an offending member, probably meaning habit now, so you'll go into heaven, albeit maimed, rather than have your nice, fit, tanned body thrown into the fiery realm of Gehenna. Now, one alternative view of this one often hears is that that Gehenna was just a garbage dump in that area, and that the bodies of criminals and apostates were thrown there because they couldn't be given a decent burial, and therefore these warnings are just saying, make sure you live honorably so you are entitled to a sanctified burial. But that doesn't seem to be borne out by archaeology, which shows no evidence of garbage dumping there, which is the idea they depict it as the fire that's devouring the garbage is never at a loss for fuel. The maggots eating the bodies are never without a snack. But it doesn't actually seem to have been a garbage dump. In fact, the evidence archaeologically will tell you that one way or the other, and it doesn't here. And nobody even tells us this version of the story until the Rabbi David Kimchi in something like the 12th century. So it seems to be a later guess at what the idea was. But Gehenna appears as a place of fiery torment in the Quran, and it probably already means that, or at least fiery destruction in the Gospels. Of course, there's the problem as to whether any of these sayings actually go back to Jesus, and what a can of worms that is. I don't want to get into that at the moment. If you want to look up these passages about being thrown into Gehenna, you can find them in Mark 9:44 and following. Real edifying stuff. I should mention, by the way, that the Pauline epistles never mention anyone going to hell. There is a mention in general terms of the wicked being destroyed when the righteous are vindicated at the second coming, but according to 1 Corinthians 15, you either rise from the dead to gain immortality, or you're just dead. You're out of luck. There's nothing about the wicked being raised for punishment. Granted, you find that in the book of Revelation and in the book of Acts, but not in any Pauline writing. Well, all right. Where did they get the idea, by the way, of a fiery hell? The It's an old idea, even in the Old Testament, but it seems to have come actually from Sicily. It has to do with the geography of Sicily. There's all kinds of volcanic eruptions and magma pits, fumaroles, incredibly hot water jetting out of the caves and so on. And so already that contributed to the idea of the fiery torments of Tartaros. And the notion seems to have come into the ancient Middle East by means of traveling preachers who were Neo-Pythagoreans. And so the connections are quite interesting, but the whole notion of the fiery hell is just transplanting Sicily into the underworld. And this is kind of important because once you see where a frightening notion like hell comes from and how it was put together, it just sort of takes the impact out of it. It's hard to be scared of it anymore when you realize, yeah, we can trace how people cobble together this thing. Not much reason to believe that nobody had any real information about this. There was no revelation of it. It was just a growing folktale, basically. Now, going from origins and biblical factors to theology, what is it that people believe about hell? Whether they should or not, whether there's any basis to it. What's the idea of hell? Well, of course, there are plenty of them. The one you usually hear is the notion that hell is eternal torment. This, I guess, would be the historic Christian view, the mainstream view. There are references to people being thrown into hell, as I say. The idea of degrees of punishment in hell is just barely mentioned in the Bible. In Luke 12:47 through 48, where Jesus tells Peter that when he comes back, the people that knew what to do and didn't do it will receive a much more severe beating than the poor saps that misbehaved but didn't know any better. I mean, that's not going very far, but if you want some kind of Bible hint at degrees of hell, it might be there, but it really seems to come from books like the Apocalypse of Peter, a 2nd century work that it really is the prototype for Dante's Inferno and a number of medieval works like that, where people claim to have visions of hell and different people are catching different horrible punishments according to what they did in life, what the chief sin was. Like liars are eternally hanging by their tongues. I don't want to tell you what happens to women that get abortions. This is already going to be sickening enough. But that's an old view. And it goes on forever, right? Well, a slightly less awful version of it is found occasionally in Christian terms, the idea that hell is millions of years of torment ending in annihilation, and that'll be the end of you, right? It was the teaching of William Marion Branham, a controversial Pentecostal faith healer who kind of thought he was the second coming of Christ. It's common these days, I guess. And Charles Chauncey, one of the early Universalists, said this. He said that, the Bible does speak of eternal punishment, but what's the word? The word comes from punishment or eternal life, same thing. Eternal represents an adjective form of ion or eon. And in my version of the New Testament, I translate it as the life of the age, or the life through the ages, or punishment for the duration of the ages, that kind of thing. That implies it might not be forever. And that might be hinted at when in the Gospel of Matthew in chapter 5 it says that you won't get out of there, literally referring to jail, but possibly implying hell. You won't get out of there until you've paid the last farthing. That views hell as a debtor's prison, where you're thrown in because you can't pay your bills, and they've somehow quantified it so that they're going to take it out of your hide, and once you've served your time, you're okay. I mean, really paying your debt to society, literally. And that would imply a quantifiable stay there that you get out of. That's very similar to purgatory, the notion that there is a purging place It's not punishment, but purification, and you're slated for a definite time there. Protestants don't quite buy this, right? It doesn't seem to fit with the idea that Christ died for your sins, but there are plenty of people that believe in it anyway, and that's the Buddhist and Hindu version of hell. I guess we could combine it with the one we just talked about, because it is going to end, but after a, hell of a long time. You may be there for millions of years working off the old bad karma, and then you get out, at least to another life, and you better keep your nose clean.